Hey everyone, and welcome back. So today we're going to continue creating our structured bodice, and in this demo we are going to bone our lining. Okay, so here's our lining. It's been all sewn up and it's ready to be boned. Okay, and this is the boning we're going to use. This is cloth covered 1/4 inch boning. Okay, and basically what this is plastic. Alright, these plastic strips, and it's covered in this casing, this cotton kind of casing. Alright, and it has a right and wrong side to it. This is the right side, and you can tell it's a little raised where the boning's in there, and it has stitches on both sides there. And then the wrong side is pretty flat. Okay, and you can get this in all sorts of different size rolls. This is like a 12-yard roll. You can get this from Wall Whack, actually. It's great, and it's not very expensive at all. And this boning works wonderfully, okay, for the purposes that we need it. So we're going to go ahead and measure off how much of this we need, all right? So the way I figure that out is I take whatever it is I'm going to bone, in this case, this lining, and I'm going to just kind of rough measure it off in all the places that I'll be putting the bone. Like so. And here. Okay, and once I have half of it done, I can kind of just fold this in half. Get how much I need. That should be plenty. Cut it. And there we go. Alright, so now that I have my boning, I just need to take out, we need to take out the plastic boning out of the casing. So we just kind of just pull that right out. And if you have a long piece of boning, it can be a little harder to do, but just keep pulling it down and it will eventually come right out of the case. There it goes. Alright, it's all out. So there's the boning, and then here is all the casing. So there's many ways to bone these bodices, and the way I'm going to show you is a very general way, which is actually, I would say, probably works, in most cases. So, and then depending on what you want, you can bone it these different ways, but this way will give you good structure. The way I'm going to show you will give you good structure and good support, and I'm actually going to do it what I would call the general way, and then after I finish that and show you, if you feel like you need more support in the bust area, I'll show you a couple more places you can place boning for added support. Okay? Alright, so the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to have a bone right down here in the center. Okay? I'm going to place another bone here on princess seam, and I'm going to do it on the front panel side of the seam. Okay, I'm never going to cover a seam up directly, so I'll put it on this side. And the reason we put it on this side versus this side, if you think about the patterns, this pattern is a lot flatter along this edge, and this one is more curved. So it's a little easier to sew to this side. Okay, I'm going to put it right down the center of the side front panel. Alright, and that gives the side of the bust a lot of support. We're not going to do it on side seam, because a lot of times if you need to make an alteration, you'll do it at side seam, so we don't want to cover that up. We're going to do it down the center of the back side panel, and then we're going to do it on this side of the back princess seam, the side closest to center back. Okay? So let's go ahead to the sewing machine and start sewing this on. Alright, we're here at the machine. So we're going to start here. Here's my back princess seam right here. Okay, this is what we're going to start on, and we're going to do it on the princess seam, or right on the seam allowance of the princess seam, but on the back side of the princess seam along this. Okay, all right. So when we do this as well, we have our stay stitching here. That's right on our seam line. Okay, right on our stitching line. So it's a 1/2 inch up from the cut edge. We have that at the bottom and at the top at the neckline, right here. And we want to make sure that we stop our boning about 1/8 to 1/4 inch away from those stitching lines at the bottom and at the neckline at the top. Okay, if we go right up to our stay stitching or past it, then we aren't going to be able to sew this closed. And if we don't leave a little space between our stay stitching and where the boning starts and ends, we're going to end up not being able to understitch later when we need to finish this to the outside shell. Okay, so we want to leave about 1/8 to 1/4 inch between where the boning starts and where the boning ends, between the stay stitching and the boning. Okay, so here we go. Alright, so again, this is back side of the princess seam. I'm going to leave my boning a little longer than I need it. It will make it easier to stitch closed. Okay, so again, I'm not going to start, you can see my stay stitching right here. Okay, it's going right along here. This is the bottom of the bodice, by the way. So I'm going to overlap that a little bit with my boning just because it will make it easier to close. But when I start my stitching, I'm going to start it again about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 inch away from that stay stitching. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. Alright, let's start applying the boning. Now again, this is my center back is right here. Okay, this is the princess seam, the back princess seam. I'm going to apply the boning right on top of this side of the seam allowance. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm lining up this edge of my boning right with that seam. Okay, and when I stitch this on, I want to make sure I stitch right on top of the stitching of the boning casing. Okay, if I go into the casing at all, alright, off that stitching that's on the boning casing already, if I go into the casing, I'm going to make that tube or that casing narrower, and I won't be able to put my boning in. Okay, so be very careful of that. Alright, here we go. We're going to back tack. And just go ahead. Now this is just like sewing a, ribbon onto fabric, basically. It's not that complex. And if it helps, you can pin it or baste it in place. First. Okay, we're getting close to the neckline stay stitching. Remember, we want to stop about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch away. Right about there, looks good. Okay, I'm going to put my needle down, lift up my presser foot. I'm going to turn now to come across. So I think I'll take one more stitch up, a little far. Right about there. Looks good. Okay. Good. Now I'm going to come across. Now I'm going to back tack across the top. So forward, back, and forward. Okay, the reason I do that, I found when I just go across once, when I push the boning up, a lot of times it breaks through there. So I like to back tack across there once or twice. Okay, I'm to the other side of my boning. I'm going to put my needle down, lift my foot up, and come down the other side of the casing. And I'm just going to kind of pull both panels, my center back and my side back panel in opposite directions, just so I get a nice clean stitch and nothing's like kind of easing or crumpling under there. And again, I'm going to stop about 1/8 or 1/4 inch away from the bottom. There we go. Pull this out, and I'll cut my threads. There we go. And I'll come up here, and here's the extra boning casing hanging off. I'll just cut, leaving about 1/8 of an inch between my stitching and that boning. Alright, so there's the first boning casing applied. Okay, that's what it looks like from the wrong side. And then here's the right side. Okay, and here's like a little bit of a closer up. So there's the right side of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and apply our next one. Okay, the next one is going, so here's my back panel, and then here's my side back panel. We're going to go right down the center of our side back panel. Okay, so again, I'm just going to eye it, but if you want to mark it on there, you can. And I'll leave my boning a little longer than we need it. Okay, that should be right about the center. Let's go ahead and put it in. And we're starting about 1/8 of an inch away from the stay stitching. gonna eye that. There we go. All right, now make sure I'm centered up top too. Just get this all. There we go. All right. And we're close to the top here. Again, we're going to stop about 1/8 of an inch away. Turn, back tack across. And come down the other side. And there we go. Okay. All right, and there's the second component applied. All right, the next one's going to be applied right in the center here. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. This is my side front panel. Again, I'm just going to find the center of the bottom. Looks like it's about right there. Center at the top. And again, if this helps you to pin it on right in place or mark down the center of your panel so you have a line to follow, please feel free to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, I'm just going to eye this right down the center. Alright, there's our side panel. Alright, and now let's do our princess seam. Okay, so here's center front right here, and we're going to do this side of the princess seam, the one closest to center front. Alright, this is probably the hardest one to do. And just because we have this curvature up here around the bust, and we're going to end up having to fold or flip the bust in to really get in there. We're going to have to pull it tight, but it's not that big of a issue. Shouldn't be too bad. All right, here we go. Now what I'm doing, again, is I'm not going to sew right over the princess seam. I'm going to stay on the center front panel side of the seam allowance. And I'm going to line up the edge of my boning right with that seam. And that's what I'll use as a guide. Okay, now I'm getting up towards where we get a lot of contour around the bust. So I gotta make sure that I'm pulling those two panels, my side front, my center front panel, in opposite directions, and flattening that seam out really nicely. Again, the larger the bust, the kind of harder this is to do. So you have more contour. But let's go nice and slow and spread it evenly as you go. And one more. That looks good. Okay, let's come across. Making sure I'm flattening out this whole area as I go. There we go. All right. All right, now we're just about halfway there, or we are halfway there, a little over. We're going to go ahead and bone right down our center front, okay? Now here I have a point at where my neckline comes together, all right? So I'm going to make sure I stop a 1/4 inch away from that point, because when I go to sew this to the outside shell and everything and then add my facings, there can be a lot there, and I don't want my boning getting in the way of that. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I stop at least a 1/4 inch away there. All right. Again, if you want to mark your center front, feel free. I'm just going to actually find my notches at the bottom and the top neckline and kind of crease it like so. And then that I can have, just gives me that crease I can follow. All right, so here we go. Let's do the front. Okay, again, I want to stop about a 1/4 inch away from that point, give or take. Again, if my neckline was just flat there, I would just go all the way up to, the 1/8 of an inch. That point just makes it a little more complicated. Right. All right, so there it is, halfway bone now. Okay, we did our back princess seam, center of the back side panel, center of the side front panel, front princess seam, and center front. Okay. All right, from here I'm going to finish it. I'm going to do the same thing going down the other side of this bodice, There's not going to be any difference, so I'm just going to actually fast forward through all this so you can watch me do it very quickly. All right, here we go. All right, there we go. Our last bone is, our casing is applied. Cut this. Okay, so it's fully boned. Let's go back to the cutting table and look at this better and fill it with bones. All right, there it is. Fully boned, so you can see all the casing in here. That's the wrong side of it. Flip it around, and you can see the right side as well. Okay, so now we need to fill all of these casings with the boning. Okay, so before we do that, just one thing I want to mention. You'll notice here that this boning has a curl to it. If I kind of unwind it a little bit and get this edge, all right, you can see. Actually, let me just cut a piece. I'll show you better. Okay, you can see how it has a curve to it. It looks like the letter C almost. All right, so it's very important that that curve goes against the body. All right, like this. All right, so here's my casing, or here's my boning. The body is going to be touching this side. Okay, so we want to go against the body like that. All right, so again, that C, that kind of curve here, okay, wants to go against the body like this. Okay, if we were to put it in this way where it's curving away from the body, all right, that would pull the lining away from the body. Okay, when we put it in like this, this pushes the lining up against the body, and that's what we want. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill each of these boning casings. All right, what we're going to do, you can see this is kind of a straight edge and it has kind of these corners here. We're going to curve that edge with your scissors. I find if you put the boning towards the back of the scissors and then just gently curl around, it will do it. And then again, we're making sure that that curl or that curve is going against the body. Find your boning case opening right here, and I kind of like just put a little pressure right here, and I have everything against the table, and I just slide it right in like so. And then for now, we're just going to cut it even with the casing. All right, and then we'll just do that for each one. So again, kind of curve the edge, the top edge of that boning. Find the opening to your casing. Kind of get started, and I just put a little pressure right there to hold it flat and slide it in. And we'll do this for each one. Okay, here we go. All right, there's our last bone in. Okay, so there it is. Okay, we have all our bones in the casings. Now what we need to do is we need to go into each one of these casings and pull it back, exposing the bone enough so we can trim it back so that the bone is 1/8 of an inch to a quarter behind the stay stitching. Okay, because we don't want that boning to get in anywhere close to that seam allowance, or we'll have a lot of trouble stitching on the outside shell. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pull that boning casing back and trim it. Okay, and just double check and make sure it's back about 1/8 of an inch. That looks good, and we'll do that to each of these bones. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. All right, so they've all been trimmed back. Now we need to go ahead and stitch all of the bottom of the casing closed. All right, so I'll go to the machine now, and I'm going to stitch like an 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch above my seam allowance to close all those casings. All right, and I'll just back tack on each one of these. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Okay, we're back at the machine. We're going to just go ahead and tack all these closed. Here we go. And again, we want to keep this about an 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch above that stay stitching, so we don't run into any problems when we're trying to stitch the outside shell on. And just back tack over each one. I'm not even clip my threads until I'm done. It'll just go quicker just to move on to the next one. And stitch it closed. And then to the next one. And there we are. And now I'm going to trim away all these threads real quick. All right, let's go back to the cutting table. All right, there it is, completely boned. All right, so we got one at center front, side front princess seam, center of the side panel, center of the back panel, and back princess seam. All right, so that's the right side of it. Here's the wrong side of it. All right, I'm going to throw this on the draping form real quick so you can see what it looks like on the body. And then I have another short video showing how to add a little extra support if you need it. A few more bones. So we'd add another bone coming from here up into this point, and then another bone coming from here up into that point. And you can see that in the next video. But this general boning pattern really works for a lot of body types. Okay, so I'm going to put this on the dress form. And one more quick thing I'm going to do real quick is just trim all the extra boning casing down to an 1/8 of an inch. All right, like so. All right, so let's go ahead and throw this on the dress form and we can see how it looks. All right, here it is on the dress form. You can see the bodice lining is fully boned now. Just give you a quick turnaround. Just pin in the back for now. All right, you can see where all those bones are. Okay, so that's the structured bodice, fully boned. All right, now in the next video below, I'm going to show you if this isn't enough support for what you need, we're going to add a couple other bones to it. They'll be on both sides of center front, and they'll come up from here and just angle right up into this area, adding some more support into the bust. And then here on side seam as well, coming from right here and then angle up right up into there, okay? Which will add more support to the bust area, okay? So there it is.